I think the education part you find in DSOMM also, but the other compliance part are not well framed. I think that is because I'm more a technical person than a compliance person.
Okay.
But
Thanks.
if there is someone who's listening here and wants to create a pull request with more governance-related activities, it's always welcome, right?
Welcome to the Elephant in AppSec, the podcast to explore, challenge, and boldly face the AppSec elephants in the room. I'm Alexandra, your host and AppSec enthusiast and growth manager at Escape, an API discovery and security platform. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome a true expert in DevSecOps, Timo Pagel. With over 20 years of experience in security strategy, web development, and DevSecOps architecture, Timo brings a wealth of knowledge to the table. As a freelance consultant and university lecturer, he is passionate about training the next generations of AppSec professionals and actively contributing to the open source community as the leader of the OWASP DevSecOps maturity model DSOMM project. In this episode, Timo and I deep dive into the critical differences between popular maturity models like DSOMM and SAMM, uncover why a one-size-fits-all approach to maturity frameworks often fails, and explore the unique challenges of implementing DSOMM in startups versus large enterprises. Along the way, we tackle controversial topics like the shortcomings of many AppSec tools and whether security teams are being set up for failure by immature solutions. Dive right in!
So, hi, Timo. I'm super excited to have you on the podcast with me today. It's it's super warm in the summer here. It's like 35 degrees today. So, yeah, I don't know how it is on your side, but it's I'm super happy that it's almost like the holiday period. I think the business, I guess, never sleeps. I saw you also been quite active. I think you are still quite active on LinkedIn as well, and like I've been reading some of your latest posts, and I think one of them stood out about the application security program, where I can compared, for example, how different marketing people approach writing about application security program, kind of what is missing. And you mentioned different steps. So always start with assessing your current state. And I think that's what you mentioned, like a lot of marketing people are actually missing in their articles. So kind of understanding your starting point, understanding actually before you have to actually work on something that you are going to improve, and understanding first, and then only plan your kind of maturity activity roadmap. And then tailor it to your unique needs and goals. So how do you think, for example, the DevSecOps maturity model actually fit, within this definition? Is it fit something that fits within the first step? So accessing your current state, your maturity first.
For assessing, I think DSOMM is useful for very technical people to see where they are right now, to make a plan where they want to go.
Yeah, okay. So can you define a little bit more, and why do you think it's for the very technical people? What is DSOMM and
When I have some clients who are coming to me and they did a SAMM assessment, and SAMM is very broad, and DSOMM is already very technical. I have some people coming to me saying it's not technical enough. So for dev and ops people, sometimes they need a bit of guidance for some activities. We have over 100 activities, so I think it's normal that people sometimes struggle to understand what it is. Even when I look at it, I sometimes have to think for a minute, what does it mean? But in general, it's much more technical. I still, when I design the activities, I still need to think how technical do I want to be. For example, I had a discussion last week about pinning of artifacts. So a DevOps person came to me and said, what is pinning of artifacts? What should I do now? And during our discussion, I explained that, for example, you can use an image hash to pin the version, or in case you have immutable images, you can use a semantic version. And then he understood, and he said, yeah, that's now he knows what to do. So, but I have to define it in a way that I don't have to rewrite the whole model next week. When there are technical changes, I still don't want to rewrite it every week. But there's much more are dynamic, so much more shifting left and right and rewriting definitions than in other maturity models. Because when you are defining it on a high level, for example, in the ISO, it's very, very high level. The ISO 2000, what is that? 2701.
7001, I think. At least what I remember. Yeah.
And that's very, very, very high level. And then comes other maturity models like SAMM or the build security and maturity model. And under that, we find DSOMM. So that's why there is much more going on than in the other maturity models.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with you that that's indeed between like a SAM and DSOMM. Like the difference is kind of the technical part, because when I was reading more on it and like exploring more the information, like indeed I saw in your presentation how you define like ISO to 7001 is kind of at the top, SAM then at the bottom, and DSOMM more granular. But even like for to calculate your maturity score, I think, for example, for me, it was very easy to like how you do it with the SAM, because they also provide like Google Sheets or Excel to use that. While in DSOMM, we have to, as I remember, install the Docker image. If correct me if I'm wrong. So you have to have also more technical skills to actually implement it, to calculate it, right? So why did you decide to actually build it that way?
First of all, you can use the application without knowledge. So on
Okay.
dsm.ovas.org, you find it. And the data, when you fill it out, is only stored in your browser. So you could use it without technical skills. But yes, when you want to run it in your company and maybe use the application also to show to the people how your current state is in the organization or for a team, then you will need more technical skills. But DSOMM is mainly for technical people. I think they should bring the knowledge to start a Docker container.
Okay, so at what moment, since you kind of have this granular view, do you think can you use when should you use, for example, SAM and DSOMM in combination, or when should you actually start using DSOMM, you think?
That depends on who is performing the assessment, for example. So in case there are technical people performing the assessment, then I would go for DSOMM. In case that are more, I mean, security people are also technical people, but in case that are more security-related people, then I would use SAM as a first stage. We said already an application security program, first you need to assess. So there you can choose SAM or DSOMM, I would say. For security people, I would use SAM, but in the end, we have a mapping from DSOMM activities to SAM activities. So when you do DSOMM, you automatically get a lot of stuff from SAM. So not the governance part. I think there are some things missing in DSOMM, but other than that, I think when you do DSOMM, you have already a lot of insights for SAM. Yeah, but I would choose it depending on who is performing the assessment. In case it's DevOps, also dev or operations people, then I would use DSOMM. In case it's a security person, you can choose which one you like. And it also depends then on your goal. So if your goal is to get budget from management, I would rather use SAM or DSOMM, because there in SAM you have some sample data from other organizations. We can say we are here and other companies in our area are here. Sorry, I have to rephrase. In SAM, you currently don't have benchmarks. In SAM, you just have the reference where you should be for different industries. While in BSAM, you have also a benchmark. But from my point of view, this benchmark doesn't help too much, because in the end, you want to define where you as organization you want to be in 3 years, and I don't feel that it helps a lot to have a comparison with other competitors, because you don't have enough information. For example, how big or small is this competitor? So it's nice for marketing, but I think it doesn't help too much in the end. Yeah, but if you want to get budget, I would use BSIMM or SAM, because they are made for management. When you look in DSIMM, you have gray spots. That means there's no activity because I couldn't find a useful activity for that. While for that dimension and level, while in SAMM or BSAMM, it's structured in the way that management understands. So there's the structure and the layout. From my point of view, is a focus, so that you can convince the management to get budget for your DevSecOps initiative, for example.
Okay. And maybe also like with the governance, because you mentioned, for example, in DSOMM, the governance part is a bit more absent. Was it a choice on your side that you decided to focus less on that part? Because this is something that, say, governance is quite often associated with CISO role and like very, high level. So was it because of that, or was it any other reason why you decided to focus less?
Yeah, I think the education part you find in DSOMM also, but the other compliance part are not well framed. I think that is because I'm more a technical person than a compliance person.
Okay.
But if there is someone who's listening here and wants to create a pull request with more governance related activities, it's always welcome, right? It's an open source project in DSOMM.
Yeah, yes, I saw there are, I think, 32 contributors, something like this, on GitHub. So it's yeah, quite a lot. And I also saw it. I think it was a part of Open CRE project. I don't know if you know the project. It was led by Rob van der Veer. How do you know how exactly is it connected, or what was like the reasoning behind including DSOMM?
My goal, why I talked with Spyros about it, was he is the one who integrates projects into OpenCRA. Was that I thought it's a nice idea to have an LLM behind it, and you can ask questions and get answers. I think there is some fine tuning needed to get answers.
Okay, what kind of fine tuning do you? Yeah.
Currently, you're not getting, from my point of view, a lot of out from there. So when I search, for example, for activities in the, I ask for activities, and I don't get the answer which I want to. I think it needs to be more that there are question pre-frames, so you get some questions in the start which are predefined, and then I think you might get better answers out.
Okay, so kind of train that to get the better answer, to get better user experience, to get actual answers to your questions. Yeah, I mean, I see totally, makes sense. And I think you also in your thesis, as I could see, at least you worked on the how to implement that within the startups. How do you think like the implementation of the DSOMM within the startups is actually different from like large organizations? Because, for example, like multinational companies, they are usually more mature. So you can say, yeah, they want to. No, not really. Some. Some at least are more mature. Expect them to at least research. At least there are more AppSec engineers. There is more AppSec engineers within. I don't know. You might disagree with it, but like big companies, you have a dedicated role. In the startups, you do not always have a dedicated security role. So it's either going to be, let's say, CTO or a very like security conscious dev who might take care of security. So how would you like typically approach, DevSecOps maturity in like startups versus like big organizations?
In big organizations, first of all, you have some definitions of some pre-requirements. So you will need to know your applications and who is responsible for that you don't have in a startup. In a startup, you can just assess the few teams you have. While in a big enterprise, also you cannot do maybe you can, but mostly what I see is that there is not the will to assess every team or every application. In a startup, that's easy, right? So if there is a person interested in doing an assessment, that person can do it. Depending on, often they have a defined stack for so when they do it for one application, it applies for the 5 other applications they have in a startup, but that is not the same in an enterprise. In an enterprise, you have on one side very modern technology for new applications, and on the other hand, you have old mainframes. So very different worlds, I would say. So there is a big difference between applications. So in a startup, often they are using only modern technology. So that I would say is quite different. So that also means that in an enterprise, you have to think about the different platforms where applications are running on. So you can kind of pre-assess them before you go to the development teams, because then you can includes the results from the different environments where the applications are running for that team. So I then mostly ask, on which platform are you running? And then I can say, these things I asked already your operations team, and therefore we only need to focus on this application-related activities.
Okay, because you do consulting for a lot of organizations. Like when you arrive, what are the steps that you usually do? Like, do you I guess assess their current state? What are the steps do you take to assess, their current state? Do you immediately start with the DSOMM, or are there other parts, of that you need to assess?
It depends on the size of the company. In case it's a small, and on the budget, it depends a lot on the budget. If it's a small company or a company not willing to spend a lot, what I do is, I would call it lightweight application security programs. So I do trainings and threat modelings. So that is the only thing I do, because with that I have enough to do already, right? So one customer said to me, when I talk for 5 minutes, he has worked for 2 weeks. So when I'm in a meeting for 2 hours, he has too much to do.
Okay. Too much to fix and to implement.
Yeah, kind of like, I mean, it was in a friendly way, right? Yeah, how you framed it, but
yeah, of course.
In the end, they're generating work.
Yeah. And how do you, in these cases, measure that actually they do implement something? Because sometimes, at least the feedback that I've heard, you have to accept that they're probably not going to implement all your advice. So you're just gonna be there, kind of, let's say if it's not only training, just training, they don't have a choice, they're gonna be there, but say they're doing threat modeling, and then they do not implement any like security protocols or guardrails like after that. So how do you deal with that?
As a freelancer, as a consultant, I cannot do much, but it depends on my role. So when I do it, these lightweight application security programs, then I have a meeting, let's say, every month. And then I ask sometimes in one of the next meetings that you do something here. As a consultant, I cannot ask too much, right? Because they shouldn't feel bad all the time when they talk with me. But I also had leader roles.
Okay, but usually, do they always feel bad, or have you ever arrived, at the organization and you were surprised, wow, you guys have done such a great job, or it never happened?
After threat modeling, I think I always get the feedback that it was great to do it.
Okay, but like other way around, for example, for you, that you arrived at the company and let's say they've already had some kind of maturity, like security maturity, they're not complete beginners. Has it ever happened to you that you were actually surprised positively, like that about what they've already implemented or put in place? from the security perspective.
Yes, that also happened. I once went to a potential customer and he said, let's do a Kubernetes assessment together. And then we briefly discussed what he did. And then I had to say, at that point, I didn't have a lot of Kubernetes knowledge. But then I had to say, I can't help you out here. You have more knowledge than me. So,
Okay.
I mean, that's 5 years back. Now I have much more knowledge, but that sometimes happens, right? That the customer has more knowledge than I have. So I was surprised in a positive way, yeah.
No, that's great. I mean, it is some people indeed might have some organizations might have more maturity on certain topics. And like within the DSOMM, what do you think like are the metrics that you found or particular like that are actually the most useful to measure the maturity?
You mean which activity or?
Yeah, which activity?
Yeah, as I said, when I have not a lot, I would focus on threat modeling a lot of time. Then I would focus on threat modeling and security training. Because, for example, writing policies, you can do that. But the question is, are developers or operations people read that policies?
Okay.
And when you do a training, you see that people are there. You don't know if they actually utilize the knowledge afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe a bit you figure out through the threat modeling. Yeah, but that's how I would start in case I have not a lot of
Do you check afterwards if they're using the knowledge? It's hard because I think that's actually one of the hardest parts of when you do the training or when you like do the initial assessment or define, what you need to improve is actually like, and let's say you plan the roadmap, everything looks like picture perfect, but then if you don't do anything about it, it's kind of a pity as well. I would say, how would you recommend someone to enforce actual implementation? Let's say they realize their maturity is quite low and they need to put a lot of different things in place. How would you recommend them to enforce actually putting those things in place?
We have a maturity model, right? So
Yeah.
DSOMM goes from level 1 to level 5. And when you start, you don't need to look at level 2, 3, 4, and 5. You just start with level 1 and see what activities have you implemented and which haven't you implemented. And then you mostly you find something already on level 1.
Okay. So you really have to like make sure that the level 1 is like checked, the box is checked, and only then you start at the level 2.
Yeah, I mean, if you create your own application security program, then and you're in the planning phase, how should it look, and you did the assessment already, then you will also take into account which tools you have already, right? It's more, as bigger the organization is, there's more tools you have already. Doesn't mean that every team is using them, but you have already a lot of tools often, and then you can adjust, right? So you say in DSOMM, this is level 3 or level 2, and I move it a bit to the left to level 1, for example, because the tool is there, the process is already defined, it's easy to use. So that's why I want to have it at level 1. That's
Okay.
I would say when you start with the planning, then that is something you should.
Okay, yeah, but I think like with a lot of different tools, usually at least what I've seen people start, they have a SAST, SCA, and then they're kind of moving to more advanced tools. They start implementing DAST. These in the large organizations, they also use like ASPM tool to aggregate all the information. And I think so. You commented recently on DAST tools, like on the role of authentication in DAST, and I think there is in DSOMM there's a test and verification part and like dynamic depth of applications, as I remember. Like I think you were trying to understand whether authentication is necessary in DAST within the context of that. What are like? Why did you actually ask that question? How did you think about it?
To have authentication in dynamic application security testing. Why? During my studies, I did a research project. During that, I figured out that it's obvious. What you don't see, you can't test afterwards, right? So you need different authentication rules to cover in order to have all the different application passes which are available. I also discussed this with other security architects on LinkedIn. And the feedback was that we shouldn't that's not implemented in DSOMM, but I will implement it soon. That deactivation of authentication first, because that's easy. Not to test different rules might be difficult to implement, especially when you want to automate it. But it might be easy to first deactivate it completely. So the spider, so the first process in dynamic application security testing is spidering, that you get all the different passes, so that that can get mainly most of it, let's say, and then at a later stage, so you can also use different roles.
Okay, like different certificate for different roles, right?
Yeah.
Because I think, yeah, I mean, for sure, like the feedback that I've heard sometimes on that is that the authentication part is a bit of a pain point, that you need to have, some information to actually start the scan, and it's not always easy, and you have to have some of the also, let's say, for the APIs schema available, so to start the scans as well. So it's a lengthy process, and the authentication, if you can sometimes remove it, it might be easier, at least to understand what's your current, landscape from the security perspective. And what do you think are the type of the tools? Because I mean, I mentioned on my side, like at least what I've heard is SAS and SCA, but on your side, what do you think for the different types of tools that are needed depending on the maturity of organization?
You need quite a lot of tools, right? In the end.
And security is a lot about tools, yeah.
And and I think in security, even when you pay for the tools, they are often not having the quality you want to. So when you go to DevOps, they have very mature tools, I feel. While in security, even when you pay for it, they are often having a lot of problems. A customer of mine is using a tool currently for license scanning and software composition analysis, and somehow it stopped working. So I mean, you can't believe that when you hear it, right? You're buying a product and you're uploading kind of an SORM to it, and then it doesn't get categorized correctly. But that's how it is. So I feel that all the tools in security are a bit less mature than for normal IT processes.
Yeah, it depends, I guess, on the tools, but it's indeed it can happen, at least that it doesn't work the way you intend to all the time. But it's also sometimes tough to build one, because I know from that perspective. But what, for example, you mentioned the quality of the tool. Is it always like, does it work, or sometimes it's also like the quality of findings, whether like there are a lot of false positives, UX is not bad. Like, how would you evaluate the quality of the tool?
Yeah, I think there's still a lot of enhancements possible, right? When we put it positively. So I mean, you typically have the problem to decide: do I do SAST or DEST in the start? And when you go for SAST, you need a lot of fine tuning to get less false positive. While in dynamic application security testing, you have the problem of the configuration. So I personally would start with SAST, because you can, especially in enterprise, because you can roll out a bit more quickly. You go for interactive application security testing, right? That would also be possible. But I wouldn't start with dynamic application security testing, because you get so much work in the end for the.
What do you mean?
For the applications, the product teams need to implement it. While SAST, you can enforce, right? You can say you do that now, and you define centrally the quality gates, and so, for example, you only want to see critical and high findings, and you can define which rules apply, and in case the rule doesn't match, you can easily deactivate it. That's all not so easy with dynamic application security testing, because the teams need to configure it, at least in the minimum amount the minimum we talked about is to deactivate authentication, right? So that is kind of the minimum. But then when you think about a shopping application, you also have different workflows where you need to do steps in a certain way so that you actually reach it. And we already said, when the spider is not reaching an endpoint, then it's not getting tested. So the coverage is, coverage, I think is the right word for it.
Yeah.
The
Yeah,
coverage
the coverage is super important in Desktop. So usually the better it's for a lot of tools on the market, not for all the tools on the market. The coverage is indeed not always perfect. And it's hard to reach 100%. And indeed, I think that's what security engineers need to kind of, the better the tool, the higher will be the coverage. So like we had at Escape, we had literally we have a sticker, got more coverage for the desktop, because I think that's indeed something super important. And the more routes you can of application you can actually cover, the better your scanning is going to be. And I totally agree with you on that. It doesn't always have to take a lot of time to implement, but you need to authenticate the scans in the beginning. And how would you kind of try in the future? Because you also mentioned that there are some things that need to be updated, that you are going to update soon in DSOMM and improve. So how do you see actually the progress of the model, and what are your next steps that you're planning to update?
Yeah, I think the progress is in general good, right? Often some changes for the application and for the content of the DevSecOps maturity model. What I want to enhance is metrics, because so kind of the last step in an application security program is to gather metrics to validate that your program works. And one part what I want to enhance is the metrics for testing, for example, so that we get more ideas what to measure. I mean, an easy one, for example, is the mean time to response or mean time to fix, that you measure that. I still don't know what to measure first. I would say what is easier to get, what is easier to get out of the tool, and then some more metrics to see also for non-security testing dimensions. For example, for patching, getting metrics. I think that is very important, because only then you can justify why you need budget to enhance an area. Without data, it's hard to do.
Without data, it's impossible to kind of know what actually, whether something works, whether you also need to get data and to have data internally in organizations to measure that, which is not always easy. I would say, because it depends on the culture of organization, because some cultures are more data oriented and have more resources to measure it. Sometimes it's not the case. But I think, for example, mean time to fix is something that's possible to measure depending on especially you can track now with product management tools, like how long does it take for ticket to be closed by the developer. So that's a bit easier to get information on without building something complex. Would you see any other metrics potentially that a bit concrete metrics that would help someone to measure the success?
Yeah, I see a lot. One is, for example, threat modeling frequency. So I personally often don't have the challenge that the quality is not enough. I mostly start already with, are the teams doing enough threat modeling? It's hard to say what is enough, but you can, for example, say we want that threat modeling happens at least every 3 months or every 6 months. And that is something you can easily measure. And when you gather the data, and from my point of view, it needs to be done automatically. And when you gather the data and you present it to the teams, they can still say, hey, this product is currently only in maintenance. That's why we didn't do threat modeling. So it's kind of fine that no threat modeling happens. That discussions can happen. But for that, also, you need to first display the data and say, hey, these teams need to do threat modeling. And then you can come to an interaction with, or maybe you have, in case you're very mature, you have defined already that this product is currently in maintenance mode. But I'm not sure if that works in organizations. So I think mostly the process will be you display the data and then teams come to you and say, the last 3 months we did only maintenance. And then you can say, okay, that's an exception. We take that. So that's one metric. Another metric I feel is very important is to display patch management. So first of all, the first metric I would say is depend abort or renovate, so automatic pull request tools. Are these actually activated in a repository for that application? And the second question is, how long are these pull requests open? So the pull requests coming in, saying, hey, there's a new version, and how long are these pull requests open?
Okay, but in this case, how would you establish a benchmark? Because, for example, mentioned with threat modeling, it can be like every 3 months, which is potentially going to be gradually changing depending on the size of the organizations, like how many projects they ship. Like if they ship a lot of projects, in this case, it should be more frequent. So, for example, for how much time pull request is open, how would you identify the baseline? Because sometimes the organization can just be very bad at it. So do you think this kind of metrics should be available for like all the peers to benchmark on, let's say, industry level? So I don't know.
We are talking about maturity models, right? So obviously you need a maturity model again for these different metrics. When you have an application with a low protection requirement, which is in your application security program on level 1, then in threat modeling, for example, you can say you need to do threat modeling every 10 years. So kind of that you enforce that there's at least one done before they go live. And on level 2, you can say, hey, the frequency is every year. And on level 3, because that are applications which are internet facing and handling personal health data, for example, they need to do it every 3 months. And same for patching. So you again have maybe defined for your application security program 3 levels, and then you adjust these 3 levels. So maybe on level 1, you say patching needs to be done every 6 months, and then you go down to maybe the pull request needs to be closed after 7 days or something like that. So you can define it what you think is right for the different protection requirements of the application.
So it depends on the maturity of the organization in some way as well. But I think it could still be fun, like depending on the industry, you have the access, to kind of a benchmark to compare like how good you are in comparison with your peers, or at least have a community where people can actually exchange their feedback. Because I saw there is a SAMM community. I'm not sure if I saw there is a DSOMM community, or people are coming to you. But I think it could be definitely great ideas of people who are actually like working on implementing it and measuring the impact, that they have some kind of platform to exchange how it worked for them and what they are measuring, and maybe for you also to get feedback on improving it.
Yeah, but I think that is difficult because when you do an assessment against SAMM, then it's easy to share the results because you did an assessment against SAMM. While DSOMM, from my point of view, is mainly used to customize application security program, then it's, as I said, customized. So it's not the standard DSOMM, it's that organizational DSOMM. And that's harder to share. The whole application. And in the end, what we would ask is, please share your application security program. And that is much harder to share than just the benchmark results.
Okay. I mean, that's you can't. Yeah, it's very hard to share the whole program document, which it could be impossible. But at least maybe have a conversation on small topics, which could be interesting and very useful. I don't know.
Yeah, but that is kind of what happens, right? So, for example, when a person feels, hey, there is for the version control, I want certain protections like branch protection and other things, and they feel it's missing, they open a pull request, and then it finds its way to DSOMM. So when there's something missing, I think that workflow is already there. But the compare part, how is my application security program looking compared to another organization, that's very hard.
I think it's going to also depend, on the culture of the organization. So many different parameters, that maybe like metrics, for example, which is quantifiable, like what kind of metrics, you measure, what is your benchmark, let's say, that could something be interesting to at least understand where you where you stand, like how fast your team fixes vulnerabilities versus our team, and then if you need to justify, let's say internally, if you need to justify internally some investments to improve that, it can sometimes help, I would say, but yeah, it depends. I think that's that's a phrase that I hear a lot in security. And I always ask this question at towards the end of the podcast. If you would have to give advice to someone that's just starting their application security program, so we kind of already talked about on LinkedIn, but what could be the main steps to consider someone quite new to application security? What steps would you advise them to take?
In application security, they need to be able to develop. So they shouldn't jump too quickly to application security so that they understand developers. So I would say the best would be to start with a security tool, maybe, right? Because then you develop something, you get experience in developing and also in security.
Okay, so they have to start understanding like how the security tool one of the security tools works and how it is built, right?
Yeah. So yeah.
Okay. And what book would you recommend someone to read on the security?
An experienced person or a starter?
Let's say both.
Both. I can show you what I'm currently reading.
Okay.
So I'm currently reading this book here, Application Security Program. I mean, that's obvious. But what I really like is this book, Effective Vulnerability Management, for example. That are interesting books. I also like this book here.
Okay.
So,
You've contributed to that book, right?
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
And for starters, that's a bit more difficult, right? Because you need kind of a broad introduction. I mean, these books are also for starters, I would say.
I think your application security program handbook, it is going to be good for starters.
Yeah, I think
well.
at least I can say how I was in the start of my career, right? I was young and a developer, so all these program-related things were not interesting for me. So I wanted to do something and not to plan too much. So they weren't too interesting. So I saw these same guys at AppSec conferences, and I thought, they're maturity models.
Okay.
So I think in this, at least I wasn't so interested. I wanted to read something about vulnerabilities and how to fix it.
Okay. Yeah. So it depends on kind of background where you're coming from into AppSec, and whether you're a doer or say more thinker in the sense that you like to sit down and strategize and think through different, like connect different dots in a sense. For example, for a doer, do you have any like maybe GitHub projects or like hands-on things that you would recommend?
For whom?
For someone who wants to get more, let's say, hands-on experience, like participate in CTFs?
Yes, obviously. I'm also a contributor for the Overs Juice Shop project, so that's pretty much hands-on. I'm also using that. I'm teaching at universities, and I'm using it there. And that these sessions where we talk about the vulnerability, then take a look at Juice Shop, and then talk about how to fix it. Because the Juice Shop, since I think 2 or 3 years, has also the capability to show code, and then you need to identify which line is vulnerable. And in the next step, you need to, out of mostly 4 samples, decide or detect which one is the fixed, which one is the fix for that. So that is very much a lot of fun for them, especially the combination, first exploiting and then detecting the fix.
Okay, so red teaming, blue teaming, all combined together. Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Timo, for coming on the podcast, and I hope listeners learned a lot more about how to assess the maturity of their AppSec program, how DSOMM works, what are the metrics they can potentially use, and maybe you'll get more contributors
Hopefully.
So hopefully. So that's also part of the goals, I would say, to be more community driven, I think, in AppSec, and actually all together contribute to the same goal, like making applications more secure. So well, thank you so much, and it was very nice.
Thank you for the invitation.